Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome to Once Upon a Time in Texas with episode number 72. I am your host, Michael Mitchell. First and foremost, I want to start off with just kind of some random stuff of the week or two. So first off, I missed last week. I don't know if y'all noticed that. I actually had quite a few people that noticed that I did not make it on the air last week. And I do have a valid excuse for that. First off, I'll say I'm sorry, but with Scout Camp, and then we had some pretty massive wind here in North Texas for a few days, and then traveled out to New Mexico for some stuff, and then back here to more winds. Long story short, I had some pretty nasty allergies, and I kind of sounded like this. And it was tough to talk. My throat hurt. Anyway, it was just kind of rough. And I thought, I don't feel great. And so I'm not going to do my podcast. And so I didn't. So this week's subject that we're checking out was actually set up for last week, which would have been perfect. And you'll find out why here in a minute. But it didn't happen just because I didn't feel great. So allergies kind of hitting me hard. I hope wherever you are in the world, listen to this. I hope your allergies are not kicking your butt. Unfortunately, my two daughters, they now are having the same kind of allergy issues. And they've got the sore throat and the snotty nose. My son, however, knock on wood, is doing fine, and my wife's doing fine. So hopefully they continue to do well. Other news here in the big city of Wichita Falls, I believe preheating is done and baking has started, because we're supposed to be hitting 102 or 3 today. It's still pretty humid from all the rains and stuff like that. And now we're getting into the baking season here in Texas, and it's getting hot. However, I do want to report, we went to Camp Rockefeller in Damascus, Arkansas for Boy Scout Camp. We as the leaders all kind of talked about it, and we thought, good Lord, they've been getting as much rain as we have. And, they get some heat too. And we bet their mosquitoes are as big as bald eagles up there. And, it's going to be kind of miserable. And we were wrong. I don't know that I saw a single mosquito. They had flies. They had plenty of flies, and they had some horse flies up there. And those horse flies would bite the pee-wadding out of you. But, mosquitoes, we didn't really have a whole lot. Ticks, they had a bumper crop of ticks. We were picking ticks off kids all the time, every day. And I didn't have one a single time the entire week. And I found one when I got home. So it's like, well, dang it. But, The lows at night were in the low 60s, so it was almost a little chilly because I didn't take a sleeping bag. It was supposed to be hot. The days we got up to low 80s. It was just perfect, except for the last day. The last day we got up to 94, and it was a little rough. But you know what? There were 30 of us total between Troop 1 and Troop 1G. So 23 scouts, 7 adults, and I got to tell you what, we had an absolute freaking ball. It was a great time. So at the same time I was there, my parents loaded up daughter number 2, Shanna, and hauled her out to the NRA Whittington Center in just south of Raton, New Mexico. And my oldest daughter, Lorelei, had gone last year, had a ball. They call it adventure camp, but a lot of it is shooting. They're shooting all kinds of different pistols and rifles, muzzle loader, archery. They do some land navigation stuff, leadership stuff, camping and camp cooking, just all kinds of just cool stuff. And the NRA Whittington Center is just south of Raton, New Mexico, 8 or 10 miles. They've got 33,000 plus acres out there. It's just beautiful. Cannot say enough about it. The staff, the counselors, just everything was just incredible. And so we drove out to pick her up. Had a good time. I did not get to go and see the Whittington Center last year. I've been by it a bunch of times because I've been to Philmont a whole bunch, which is just down the road about 30 miles from there. And Philmont Scout Ranch, for those of y'all that don't know. And it was incredible. And so it was cool seeing the Whittington Center. And then I got an Airbnb. It's a place called The Depot. And so if you're ever in Raton, New Mexico, check out Airbnb, a place called The Depot. It is literally an old train depot from Maxwell, New Mexico, which is just south of Raton. And somebody bought it, I guess, years ago, had it moved into Raton, remodeled, and they have made it into this beautiful little Airbnb. And so, it's B&B is supposed to be for bed and breakfast. They didn't bring us breakfast. We went to Denny's for breakfast. But it was a super cool place. And so, yeah, I want to give them kudos. I forget the guy's name that owns it. But they were super nice. They communicated super well. And it's just, the views from where it sits is amazing. It's just a cool place. So if y'all are ever out that way and you need a place to stay, check out the depot. It's an old train depot in Raton. Super, super cool. So we stayed there, finally, had all three of our kids back together, which is kind of nice. They all laughed, had a good time. We went to the extinct volcano called Capulan, which is right outside of Raton, east of it. We went there, and then on the way back, we were going to stop and eat at a place in Amarillo that was kind of like this super cool breakfast place, but we didn't make it in time. So we ended up going to Buffalo Wild Wings, which was pretty good. And then we also checked out the Quahati Museum in Amarillo. And so if any of y'all are traveling west going through Amarillo, the Quahati Museum is open most days from like 1 to 5. It is a Boy Scout troop, venture crew, but it's a museum on Native American tribes, basically, and they've got a bunch of cool stuff. And kind of at the epicenter of the whole thing, since its inception, is Boy Scout troop, venture crew, and they do Native American dance. All kinds of Native American dance. I mean, grass dances, fancy shawl hoop dancing. And the guy that's there a lot of the time, Charles, is super cool. And highly encourage you guys to go check it out. Just a very well put together kind of basic Native American tribe museum. And it's a lot of the stuff that's in there is stuff that has been given to these dancers and performers in the Boy Scout troop and venture crew. And so it's pretty cool. I think he said they've been to 48 states, 9 countries. I think they've performed for the Queen of England, this little group out of Amarillo. And it's pretty cool. So highly recommend it. Go out there. If you guys get the opportunity to go, tell them the Mitchells from Wichita Falls sent you, and they'll show you around. So pretty much, I think that's it for the updates. I've got one daughter's going off to, Lorelei, the oldest, is going off to RYLA Camp, which is the Rotary Youth Leadership, and I forget what the A stands for. I think it's Academy. She's going off to this later this week at Texas Women's University. It's a super cool program. Rotaries put this on all over the world. And so if you've got kids that are juniors, check out RYLA, RYLA. Look up your local Rotary Club. Talk to them about RYLA. It's a super cool thing. I'm excited for her to go and can't wait for number 2, Shanna, to go next year. Shanna's kind of more or less done for the summer. She's done some cool things, and so she's hanging out with buddies, getting into color guard, all that kind of stuff. Going out to the swimming pool a lot. She's just having a good time. And then we're going to go back out to Red River, New Mexico, riding ATVs here in a month or two. My son Raylan's going to go see my sister and nephew up in Oregon, and my brother-in-law. Don't want to leave him out, but he's going to go up, spend a week or week and a half with them. Just a cool relationship that, he has with my nephew. They're only 8 or 10 days apart. And my sister and brother-in-law are just great, amazing people. And they invited him to come up and hang out in good old Oregon for a while. So anyway, still lots of stuff going on. My wife is volunteering just about every day at Wild Bird Rescue, which that's another thing. If you're ever in Wichita Falls, go check out Wild Bird Rescue. We've got a couple of events coming up. Hotter Than Hell 100, which is the largest bicycle race, I think, in the U.S. That's coming up in August. It's called the Hotter Than Hell 100 because you can do 100 kilometers or 100 miles, and it's usually hotter than hell. And so, anyway, that's coming up. We're going to be working that with our Boy Scout troop. Anyway, we just got all kinds of crap going on this summer. Plus, of course, I'm still doing mortgages and things like that. So that leads me into, before we jump into our next thing, well, hang on. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So let's go ahead and talk about our subject. That's 11 minutes of us and what we're doing. So Juneteenth, and this is what I was talking about. This was supposed to come out. This podcast was supposed to come out last week, but obviously didn't feel great and didn't get it done. Juneteenth is our newest federal holiday, and I know you guys have heard about it because we just had it, and there were lots of places closed, banks and things like that. But do you know what it's really about? Do you know its relation to Texas? And so in this podcast, we're going to dig a little deeper into this new federal holiday and maybe learn a little something together. Now, of course, like I said, I do mortgages, so I'm going to jump into it and say thank you to our sponsors, which are me and Victory Home Loans. If you know someone moving, especially here in Texas and Oklahoma, send them my way. Send them over to themichaelmitchell.com, THE-michaelmitchell.com. I love helping people buy homes. I've got some ag lending stuff out now. We can do mobile homes. It's so great to be with a great company like Victory Home Loans because we have a bunch of different lenders that we are partnered with at this point. And just being an independent mortgage broker, we're faster, cheaper, and easier than the big banks. And so it's nice to have a lot of options available. We got some cool products out. I've got a 0% down FHA that just came out, which is super cool. Of course, like I said, the ag lending stuff, so I can lend on land now, and the rates are actually not terrible. So, if you guys are looking at buying something like that, especially here in Texas or Oklahoma, but really anywhere, for the most part in the western United States, Victory Home Loans is great. And if I'm not licensed in that state, I can kick you over to one of my teammates that is. So themichaelmitchell.com, THE-michaelmitchell.com. Come on my way. Check me out. So where did this week's idea come from? Well, the new holiday, of course. And I say new holiday. I don't mean new holiday. It's kind of been a holiday for a while, but it's a new federally recognized holiday. So basically, I do remember hearing about Juneteenth in history class when I was younger. Didn't really pay that much attention to it, to be honest, because, I'm going to put it out here a little bit because mostly my understanding and what I got from it when I was younger was it was a holiday for African Americans or black people, And I was like, well, I'm not that. So, sorry guys. I mean, if you are African American or black, because I know lots of people from around the world listen to this, I'm just apologizing for my ignorance, really, is what it came down to. I was just, a little dumb redneck from North Texas when, growing up. And so this was just something that it was one of those subjects that's kind of floated by you and you kind of go, and then you move on with your life. And so, like I said, I'd heard about it when I was in school, history class and all that. And I've heard other folks talk about it, but of course there's a lot more talk about it this year since it is a new federal holiday. And I was interested to find out a little more. I mean, it's a federal holiday. What is this Juneteenth all about? And then I did a little digging and I found out that it's got some pretty heavy relation to Texas. So here we go. For those of y'all that don't know, we're going to learn you a little something. I went to a great website called Wikipedia, which is always incredibly accurate. I say that jokingly. There's lots of good information on Wikipedia. However, sometimes it can be inaccurate. So make sure and check references and stuff. But here's basically what Wikipedia says. Juneteenth. It's officially called Juneteenth National Independence Day. It is now a federal holiday in the entire United States. It is celebrated annually on June 19th to commemorate the ending of slavery in the United States. So the holiday's name is obviously, pushing together June and then 19th to make Juneteenth. And so basically on June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger ordered the final enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas at the end of the American Civil War. So although the date commemorates, enslaved people learning of their freedom under the Emancipation Proclamation, this only applied really to former Confederate states. So there remained legally enslaved people in the states that never seceded from the Union. And these people did not gain their freedom until the ratification of the 13th Amendment in the United States Constitution on December 6th, 1865. And so even though the Emancipation Proclamation, it took a while to get out to everybody because communications and all that stuff, it took a while to get out. And there were still enslaved people even after June 19th and even after the Emancipation Proclamation was put out until the ratification of that 13th Amendment. So it's kind of cool. So early celebrations date back to 1866, at first involving church-centered community gatherings right here in Texas. And they spread across the South among newly freed African-American slaves and their descendants and became more commercialized in the 1920s and 30s. Often centering on a food type festival because, it's America. We like our food. So then, of course, civil rights movements did more for it in the 1960s. And then there was more civil rights stuff in the 1970s with a focus on, African-American freedom and African-American arts, which has gotten bigger and bigger. And so beginning with Texas by proclamation in 1938 and by legislation in 1979, every U.S. state and the District of Columbia has formally recognized the holiday in some way for quite some time. One thing, so that was interesting. I did not know Juneteenth really kind of started here in Texas, number one. Number two, I didn't know that all states and the District of Columbia had some sort of recognition for the holiday. Again, I hadn't paid much attention to it. But then the next part is it's also celebrated by the Muskogos, which are descendants of the Black Seminoles who escaped from slavery in 1852 and settled in Coahuila, Mexico. So I've talked about that particular tribe on a previous podcast. So the day was recognized as a federal holiday in 2021 by the 117th U.S. Congress and it's when it was enacted, and President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law. So it became the first new federal holiday since Martin Luther King Jr. Day was adopted in 1983. So 41 years since we've had the most recent new federal holiday, and this is it. So Juneteenth is considered the longest running African American holiday and has been called America's second Independence Day, which I thought was interesting. I'd never heard it called that. But now that I saw this and kind of researched it some, I've seen it pop up quite a bit. It's usually celebrated on the third Saturday in June, which is closest to June 19th. And there's a historian, Mitch Katchen, considers that the celebrations of the end of slavery have three goals. It's to celebrate, number one, to educate, number two, and to agitate, which is kind of where, it came from the civil rights stuff. And so there is like a pilgrimage that some people do to Galveston. So some of the descendants of early African Americans will make, will do celebrations and do pilgrimages to Galveston. And there's just lots of multicultural things that go on. Sorry, I'm kind of reading while I do this. They include public readings of the Emancipation Proclamation, singing traditional songs such as Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Lift Every Voice and Sing, and readings of works by noted African-American writers such as Ralph Ellison and Maya Angelou. Celebrations across the country do include picnics and rodeos, street fairs, cookouts, family reunions, park parties, historical reenactments, blues festivals, and even a Miss Juneteenth contests. So that's pretty awesome. It does also say that they have red food and drinks are traditional during these celebrations, including things like red velvet cake, strawberry soda, with red meaning to represent resilience and joy. So I think that was kind of cool. There's a little more. So the Black Seminoles in Mexico hold a festival and reunion known as El Dia de los Negros on June 19th. Many former British colonies celebrate Emancipation Day on August 1st, commemorating the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. So that's kind of cool. Obviously, so on September 22nd, 1862, now keep in mind, that's important. So 1862, but it wasn't recognized and released to everybody until 1865. So we're talking almost 3 years, date to date. That's when President Abraham Lincoln announced that the Emancipation Proclamation would go into effect January 1st, 1863, promising freedom to enslaved people in all parts of the United States, including the southern states and the Confederacy, including Texas. Enforcement of this proclamation relied upon the advance of Union troops. So Texas being one of the most remote at the time, that's where it took the longest to get there, basically. That's kind of celebrating the end of slavery and people knowing about it. I'm just kind of skimming through real quick to see what else I remember. I mean, there's lots of history, of course. I'm not skipping a bunch of stuff, guys, but there is a lot of history on the end of slavery and the American Civil War, which slavery, in case you don't know, was not entirely what the Civil War was all about. But it was a piece of it, and the piece that we tend to focus on historically. And so, let's see. A long-standing urban legend places a historic reading of General Order Number 3 at Ashton Villa, which I believe is in Galveston, but no historical evidence supports this claim. There is no evidence that Major Granger or any of his troops proclaimed the ordinance by reading it aloud. All the indications are that copies of the ordinance were posted in public places, including the Negro Church on Broadway, which has since been renamed the Reedy Chapel AME Church. On June 21st, 2014, the Galveston Historical Foundation and the Texas Historic Commission erected a Juneteenth plaque where the Osterman building once stood, signifying the location of Major General Granger's Union headquarters, believed to be where he issued his general orders. So that's just kind of cool. I'd never really thought about it much. Texas was one of the more remote parts. or I guess areas of the Civil War. And so obviously that's where it took the longest to get everything enacted. So, yeah. So, anyway, that's kind of the big deal. Let me see if there's anything else. There are celebrations, like I said, in Galveston. And then it also says in some cities, black people were barred from using public parks because of state-sponsored segregation of facilities. So across parts of Texas, free people pooled their funds to purchase land to hold the celebrations on. Remember, just because they were freed, I mean, we're talking about this, and history is not always pretty, right? And that's important. I make sure that my kids know that history is not always pretty, and history is usually written by the victor. And so although all this happened in 1855, 1866, there was still a lot of oppression, not just to black or African American peoples, but kind of to everybody. Native Americans, so there was lots of it happening, and I know that there still is, but I like to think that things are getting much, much better. There was a decline of celebrations during the Jim Crow era, obviously, so from 1890 to 1908. And so there were the Jim Crow laws, which obviously were meant to keep people down. And that's unfortunate, but that's the way it was. But there were still celebrations that happened. And so in 1951, 70,000 people attended a Juneteenth jamboree. In 1951, sorry, I think I said 71, 1951. So yeah, and then there was a big revival of the celebrations from the 1960s through the 80s. Most notably, there were several that happened. One was called the Solidarity Day of the Poor People's Campaign. And it was a kind of a big revival in Minneapolis and Milwaukee. And lots of the eastern part. 1974, Houston began holding a large-scale celebration, and Fort Worth followed the next year in 1975. Around 30,000 people attended festivals in Sycamore Park in Fort Worth. 1978 Milwaukee celebration was described as drawing over 100,000 attendees. And in 1979, the Texas legislature made it a state holiday. And in the late 80s, there were major celebrations in California, Wisconsin, Illinois, Georgia, and, of course, Washington, D.C. There's also lots of prayer breakfast and things that go on. Of course, pop culture. There's lots of things that have hit kind of in the pop culture. But anyway, so rather than me just rambling on, I would encourage you guys to go check it out. Most of the states, I will say that most of the states' first official observances started happening in the early 2000s. Like California's in 2003. It ended up becoming a paid state holiday in 2022. 1996 for Minnesota, and then paid holiday in 2023. Let me see who some of the other early adopters were. Texas was actually the official early adopter of this. 1939 was its first official observance, and it became a paid state holiday in 1980. That kind of surprised me. And so anyway, that kind of wraps that up there a little bit. And then, of course, now we know that it's officially a federal holiday. So there you go. What do y'all think? Did you guys know that Juneteenth really had anything to do with Texas? I'd like to think I wasn't the only one that didn't know, but there you go. So if you didn't know, now you do. So what do y'all think? Let me know what other kind of weird or off the wall or interesting Texas history you'd like to hear about. I really need some help after 72 episodes. It's kind of tough to find stuff because I do find everything interesting. But it's kind of tough to figure it out what y'all want to hear about. So let me know. Check me out, themichaelmitchell.com. Of course, the Once Upon a Time Facebook page and group. If you know someone moving, especially here in Texas and Oklahoma, send them my way to themichaelmitchell.com. You can find me and Victory Home Loans there. Love helping people get into homes of their own. Thank you all for tuning in to Once Upon a Time in Texas. As always, remember, the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Y'all have a great week.